Next up, please join me in welcoming three Democratic strategists who have experience with campaigns both at the local and national level. Sean Sauvet worked on the Pete Buttigieg campaign. Hillary Rosen is vice chair at the SKD Knickerbocker Group and a regular on cable news. And Dr. Abdul Saeed is a public health expert and progressive activist. Hillary, let me start with you. What did you think of last night? I know you're usually involved in these, and I saw a tweet from you that you kind of enjoying kind of sitting back and watching it because you've worked behind the scenes on this. So from that perspective, and from the perspective we're all, I mean, I would be at the convention. We'd have 30 people at the convention, but we're all watching from home. How do you think it went last night?
Well, it was a little surreal, you know, when you're working at the convention like I was. You know, I never really got a chance to watch speakers. You know, unless I was sort of in the back of the stage prepping them. But I think, so I paid a lot more attention to maybe who the audience was last night, which is something I hadn't done. And, you know, the ratings were pretty good. There was a lot of action online. I think it did a good job of engaging the base. And right now, that's what we need engaged, is the base. Joe Biden is going to make the case to all of America, but we have to have this base fired up. Michelle Obama could not have been smarter in her speech last night to say, we lost these states to Donald Trump by just a couple of votes per precinct. This is not an uprising for Donald Trump. This was some of our people staying home. And that was the goal of last night, was getting that base engaged. And I think that Democrats pulled that off last night.
Let me ask a quick follow-up to you, Hillary, on that. Who is the base? I mean, the Democratic Party has changed. It used to be that the target audience, Chuck Schumer wrote a whole book on a fictional middle-class family that was kind of a swing district. But how do you define that base right now?
So I think of the base differently than a lot of people. I don't think it's necessarily an ideological base. I think it's a broad swath of Americans that believe in both progressive values, but also in an active government, and a government that actually can solve problems for people. And when you have a part of that group of people discouraged with whether or not government can solve problems, as opposed to angry at what the government is doing, which is where the Republican base is, then you lose some of your potential votes. So I think that the Democratic base believes in active government, believes in solutions, and believes in, you know, basic, you know, social progressive policies and you know, a fair economy for all. So I think it's a little less ideological and more historical and values-based.
I want to move on to healthcare. Abdul, you've worked on healthcare. You've been involved in the issue, public health expert. What did you think of Bernie Sanders' speech? As I was watching, I was wondering if he was going to address Medicare for all, which he disagrees with on Joe Biden. What did you think of overall the speech, and specifically on the healthcare issue?
So I want to step back for a second and point to a couple of pieces of context here and then answer the question. The first is that we are in the midst of a global pandemic, which is the healthcare issue of the century. For a lot of folks, it is the nail in the coffin on why we need Medicare for all. It is the reason that folks like Bernie Sanders have been fighting for this. At the same time, though, we are coming into this convention after Senator Sanders and Vice President Biden came together. They forged these unity healthcare task forces on a number of issues, healthcare being a very important one of them. I was privileged enough to serve as a Sanders appointee to the healthcare task force. But it allowed us to forge together the kind of unity that then allows a Senator Sanders to go to the audience yesterday, as we saw, and deliver a clear, concise, and contextualized version of the platform particularly contrasted to what Donald Trump has been doing on this pandemic and on healthcare. He's been trying to repeal the ACA and has basically just been missing in action when it comes to the worst pandemic in over 100 years. And so I thought that what Bernie did yesterday was masterful in terms of being able to push the platform in context to the progressive base that was so supportive of him. People like me, people all over the country who are asking, does Joe Biden really portray what we feel needs to be done right now? But he was able to put it in context, and I think it was a masterstroke in terms of being able to bring the progressive left forward to beat Donald Trump, and then on November 4th start asking, how do we organize around the issues that are so important to so many of us?
Sean, I want to pick up on that theme of Democratic unity. I mean, the 26th Democratic Convention was entertaining, and for reporters certainly, because there was so much conflict. Where do you see, Pete Buttigieg dropped out, endorsed Obama. Senator Amy Klobuchar dropped out, endorsed Obama. Not everyone followed that, but most candidates followed that lead. Where do you see unity in the party compared to 4 years ago?
That's exactly right, that Pete and Senator Klobuchar and so many other people dropped out and quickly coalesced around Joe Biden. And I think that that's what this campaign and this convention is getting at, and what Dr. El Sayed was referencing just a moment ago. Because right now, we, as John Kasich said, are at a crossroads, and we have to decide whether or not we're even going to take action on healthcare. So before we can have a debate on whether or not we should have Medicare for all, whether or not we should have a public option, whether or not we can do anything to make reforms and expand access and make healthcare more affordable, we have to beat Donald Trump. Because as long as Donald Trump's in office, the Affordable Care Act is at risk. People are at risk of being cut off of Medicaid. People are being at risk of losing their pre-existing conditions protections. So the first thing that we have to do as Democrats is unite behind the Biden-Harris ticket to carry into November and beat Donald Trump. And until we do that, so many other ideological divisions and and differences in policy within our big tent party, they matter less, because as long as Donald Trump is in the White House, everything else is still a threat. And I think that's what we saw last night with Senator Sanders' very effective speech, with Michelle Obama's very effective speech. And I expect that's what we'll see tonight and throughout the rest of the convention.
Hillary, moving our attention a little bit to congressional races, how do you handicap the battle for the Senate? Really, that the House doesn't seem to be much of a battle, and that's part of the reason why House Republicans are having trouble raising money. So a lot of the scrutiny and news focus has been on, of course, the White House, but the Senate is so important, too, for judicial nominations and oversight. You've seen the winds go with Democrats and go against Democrats. What's your status, any prediction on whether the Senate will flip?
Look, I think these dots are connected, because we saw in 2018 that the fight in these, suburban districts was not about Donald Trump. It was about health care. It was about, what people think of as kind of the basic kitchen table issues. What are families facing every day? And I think the points that were just made about health care are critical to these congressional elections all over again, or be critical of the presidential election. But I think what we will see in, these Senate races is a focus on states' needs, local needs. So, we've got two states, Maine and Colorado, I feel very confident about. The Senate needs 4 states to flip to Democrats. I think we're going to make it. We have 2 states that feel good, and then we need 2 of, Arizona or South Carolina or North Carolina, Montana, Iowa, all very gettable on these issues, on healthcare, on the pandemic, on the destruction of, the local economy. And so I think that we're going to get there. And I do think that there is a huge emphasis on this. And I think that while some of those are not going to be battleground presidential states, you will see a significant amount of investment in those states delivering those messages, particularly around healthcare to people.
Yeah, because it does. I mean, Doug Jones is in a tough race in Alabama, and he's the underdog in that race. So if you lose that race, then you got to.
That's what we have to hold.
Yeah. So that's it. But going to turnout, because both sides want turnout. Some Republicans have faulted the president, most of them privately, for not reaching out for independents. But certainly this president is focusing on his base and getting his base out. He has a firm grasp on that base. Abdul, I want to talk to you about, what about the Bernie Sanders voters? Bernie was urging them to get out. He did endorse Hillary Clinton. He did speak on her behalf at campaign events. Is there a difference between 2016 and 2020 as far as turnout among the base, specifically the Bernie Sanders base?
I do think that there's going to be a very big difference in turnout, and that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, the clear and present danger of Donald Trump has presented itself. It's been presenting itself for 3.5 years in the form of a global pandemic and destruction of just about all of the hallowed ideals we all believe in. And so it's not a theoretical anymore. It's not about whether or not Donald Trump can have more time in the White House. We all know the clear and present danger there. That's number one. Number two, I actually think the way that the Biden team has handled this is a real credit to recognizing the value and importance of the progressive movement. And reaching out and creating those unity task forces, I think, made a lot of difference in terms of not just papering over and telling folks, well, now it's time to unify, your guy lost, but rather saying, we appreciate your ideas and understand the value that they bring to the Democratic Party, and we want your ideas included and represented here. And I think that's really, really important. And then the last thing I'll say on this point is that we're in this unique moment, right? A lot of us are really frustrated about the fact that you had 4 Republicans speaking at the DNC convention. There were more Republican governors who spoke and have airtime at the DNC convention than there are Muslim Americans, for example. But at the same time, you look at the first several speakers and the last speaker last night, they were all black women. And I think the party recognizes the real importance of reaching out to its base rather than taking them for granted. And I think a big part of that base is progressives. And I know that there's a real strong feeling of the need to beat Donald Trump so that we can get to the work of organizing for all of the ideals that we fight for: Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, free college, taking corporate money out of our politics, rethinking policing so that we're investing in taking on poverty rather than punishing it. So I do believe that progressives are going to turn out. We recognize the importance of this moment. And Senator Sanders and Vice President Biden have done all they can to really forge unity rather than just talk about it.
Just a quick, go ahead, Hillary.
Can I
go
just
ahead,
one quick
yeah,
point on that, which is I think you can't underestimate the personal relationship between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders that has really contributed to this in a fundamental way. And that Joe Biden is doing something that in my long history of presidential campaigns has never really happened, which is he really isn't making this election about himself and his leadership. He really views himself and articulates it as such, as a transitional leader. As where is the future of America? Where is the future of the Democratic Party? And I think his openness to that, frankly, his humility around that, elevating so many younger politicians, whether it was through this vice presidential search or the unity task forces or others, determined amounts of leadership. He really is doing something that sets up a broad coalition for this election and for governing, I think.
I totally agree. And just to jump in on that, I think that was one of the amazing benefits of this vice presidential search, that, was more out in the open than any previous search in recent memory. But at the same time, that had the effect of lifting up and giving a bigger platform and a bigger spotlight to so many amazing women. You have Senator Tammy Duckworth from Illinois, Congresswoman Val Demings, Congresswoman Karen Bass, a lot of people who may not have necessarily been household names outside of the Democratic base, but are now so well known and very well liked and respected within the broader elements of the party and well known by voters across the country. And I think that's an amazing benefit that Joe Biden did, that, as Hillary said, not making it necessarily just about himself by lifting up so many other women and other people in the party.
Sean, I wanted to ask you about Pete Buttigieg, who you know well. When he launched his presidential campaign, he was asked, how do you say your last name? And he became a star in the Democratic Party. He said to Jake Tapper he would be interested in possibly working in a cabinet post in a Biden administration. Two-part question quickly on what do you expect him to say later this week, and what's his future in the party?
Well, I think everyone would agree his future is incredibly bright, and he exceeded anyone's expectations, probably outside of the campaign and outside of himself going into it, because a lot of people, I don't think, took him as seriously as they should have. But one thing he did say last night on CNN to Jake is that before we can do anything after November, before we can think about what forms of public service any of us might want to return to, before we can think about even measuring the drapes, we have to beat Donald Trump, and we can't take anything for granted. I think some people took, within the Democratic Party, looked at the favorable poll numbers in 2016 and assumed, oh, well, Hillary's going to win. We got this. We don't have to do that extra phone banking shift. We don't have to drive up to Philadelphia to go knock on doors and do GOTV if we're in D.C. We don't have to go as hard as we can campaigning across the country. And I think the one thing Pete said last night, and that you'll continue to hear him here and hear so many people here across the Democratic Party, is that we can't take anything for granted. As Abdul said, Donald Trump is a threat. And as Michelle Obama said last night, if you think it can't get worse, it definitely could. So we can't take anything for granted right now. And I think that that's the message that we're hearing this week, and we'll continue to hear over the next few months, that we need to do everything we possibly can to get out the vote.
Abdul, I want to ask you something about that gaining momentum in the Senate Democratic caucus. We've done extensive reporting on thehill.com of getting rid of the filibuster if Democrats win back the Senate. So there's a decent shot that Joe Biden could be president, Nancy Pelosi is speaker, and you have Chuck Schumer as the majority leader. A lot of Democrats are saying, well, wait a minute, if we're going to pass any type of health care, whether it's reducing the age for Medicare eligibility or other bills like climate change, well, then we can't let Mitch McConnell block it with the filibuster. Should the filibuster be eliminated in that scenario?
Well, I think it's very clear that the filibuster has allowed a small minority of senators to block what the large majority of Americans need and deserve and want. And this is a real problem. At the same time, one has to think about this particular administration. One of the benefits that either Senator Sanders or Vice President Biden bring to this, and in particular Vice President Biden, given his long tenure in the Senate, is an understanding of senatorial procedure and also a relationship with a lot of senators on the other side of the aisle. Now, a lot of folks point to this moment and say, this is a moment for real clear presidential action. Is this going to be Joe Biden's FDR moment? And I actually think that the better historical analog here is Joe Biden's LBJ moment. And if he's able to use this LBJ moment and his mastery of the Senate and his ability to work alongside folks who don't see it his way, he has the real opportunity to usher in one of the most important moments and eras of progressive legislation and leadership. And so I do think that it's a real benefit that Vice President Biden comes with a tenure in the Senate, understanding of both procedure and the people who make the Senate what it is, and the ability to work with them and deliver real legislative results here.
I think that's true, but I think it's also really important that Senate Democrats take a damn page out of Mitch McConnell's playbook. We have seen Mitch McConnell sort of run roughshod over Senate rules for the last several years, killing sort of everything that we care about, and at the same time shoving through judges, ad nauseum. I mean, we've gotten more judges, I think, in these last few years than Barack Obama did, because Senate Democrats have been, frankly, in my view, just a little bit too accommodating. And, I hope that when we retake the Senate, that Democrats take a lesson from him and, don't worry if a few of our caucus disagree. We've got leverage and let's use it.
Sean, this is a big issue, so I want you to be the last word on filibuster. Should the filibuster be eliminated if Democrats have control of everything?
Yes, I think it's time. I think one thing we've seen over the past few years of the Trump presidency is a continued attack on institutional norms within government and the way in which people had traditionally, across party lines, still treated each other with respect, still adhered to old traditions like the blue slip tradition. Well, that's gone. As Hillary just said, Mitch McConnell has trashed it. He's destroyed a lot of the Senate norms and rules that people decided I had to abide by for so long. And so I think it is a question of when we take the Senate back, not if, because of the incredible way in which we've expanded the map. I mean, 6 months ago, we were worried about our incumbents in New Hampshire and Michigan. Right now, they're looking increasingly good, and we have the opportunity to play offense in states that we might not have even thought were possible a few months ago, like Montana and Iowa and South Carolina. And I think we're primed to pick up seats in a few other states as well. But once we have that Senate majority, we are going to need to do a lot of work, both to repair a lot of the damage that Donald Trump has done, and also, as Joe Biden says, to rebuild, build back better and rebuild the economy to better than it was before. Because before COVID, it did not work for a lot of people, and that's something that often gets lost. And so, yeah, Democrats can't afford to wait. Joe Biden is a great deal maker. He'll try his best, and I have faith they'll be able to win over some compromises. But at the end of the day, we need to use every single tool at our disposal.
Well, that makes you unanimous on this panel. I want to thank all three of you for joining us today. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks for having us.